Welcome to You, Me in the Counselling World, the podcast dedicated to student counsellors and the road to getting qualified and beyond. Today I'm going to finish off the core conditions series and we're going to talk about congruence. Hello everybody. It is the day after a bank holiday Monday here in the UK, and yesterday was glorious, weather-wise. Today's looking a lot more overcast here in Devon, but dry so far, so that's got to be good, hasn't it? I hope for those of you that are in the UK, I hope you managed to enjoy the bank holiday weekend. It's something so lovely, isn't there, about having a slightly shorter working week. So that always feels nice, although I feel like I've got a lot to do this week in order to kind of keep on top of everything. So I thought I would get the podcast recorded nice and early in the week so that it's done. And I know that then you've all got the week to listen to it if you would like to. So thank you for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully sharing some seeds of wisdom with you. Maybe not so much the wisdom, but at least some seeds of something that I'll put out there into the universe for you to absorb. And I say put it out into the universe, I guess I'm really putting it out into the podcast land, aren't I? But you know what I mean. It's really lovely. I've had a really frustrating morning, which I need to rant and vent about. So if you don't fancy hearing a rant, then please do feel free to skip this bit. But I've been trying to do Google My Business verification, because I now am working from home and seeing clients and supervisees from home. And you would think that that would be a simple thing to verify that with Google. But no, alas, it is not simple. And you have to send in a video. And I remember doing it before and used to be able to they'd send a postcard and you could simply just have the postcard sent to the address and then you type in the verification code on the postcard and it would verify that you are indeed based at the address that you say you're based at. Now that to me was a seamless and very simple system, but now you have to provide a video, which means that you have to go try and include a street sign. Now for me where I am, the street sign is a fair old hefty walk away. And they say they want the video to be no more than about 2 minutes. So I was there, first thing this morning, trying to film the street sign, legging it along to my house. You then have to show yourself opening the front door, show the house number. You then have to show yourself in your counselling room and various bits and bobs that ChatGPT told me to do to get this through, because I've attempted it so many times and they never accept it because I think the video becomes so long because I'm having to walk so far to the street sign. So I really hope this one goes through. I managed to do it in about 2 minutes and it was very rushed. And I must have looked like a mad person out there running around, sprinting along with my phone, talking to the phone in order to try and verify that I do in fact live in the house that I say I live in and this is where I run the business from. So yeah, pretty damn stressful actually, not a process I wish to repeat. So I really hope actually that this goes through okay. If any of you have used Google My Business and have tried to do a verification, if you have any tips, please let me know. I think I've done every tip I can imagine, but if there's anything I've missed and you have any pearls of wisdom, please feel free to send them my way. I'll put a link to my Facebook page as usual in the show notes below. Any wisdom would be greatly received. And I'll keep you posted, right? When the big tick comes through to say I'm verified, I'll be very happy. But I'm not convinced, having done this numerous times, I'm not convinced that they're going to verify it. But I really hope I have followed everything that ChatGPT told me to do. I mean, quite honestly, at this point, if ChatGPT told me to walk off into the sea, I probably would have done it. So just to get this thing through. But yeah, bit by bit, hopefully that will go through because it would be a really big help in terms of just, letting people know where I am properly and being able to have a proper Google My Business page, because I've always had that in the past. I never had any problem, but since I've moved to this address, It basically seems to be impossible. So anyway, that's my little rant of the day. And for those of you that weren't here to hear me ranting, that's fine. I'm sorry about that. I completely understand. For everybody else, I hope it's given you at least a little giggle first thing this morning. And whatever time you're listening to this, I hope it cheers you up. And you can imagine me legging it around my estate with my phone, trying to verify the darn thing. So anyway, before I carry on going on about anything else, I thought I would talk about the actual topic that I'm here to talk about, which is congruence. So we've already touched base on unconditional positive regard. We've already touched base on empathy. And then there is the third of the three main core conditions. Don't forget there are hidden core conditions, but I'm not going into those right now. We're just talking about the three main core conditions as cited and created by Carl Rogers. So when I think about congruence, I think about something that's so fundamental in the therapy space, and that is about being transparent and honest and open, because that is what we ask from our clients, isn't it? We want them to come in and be themselves. We want them to be honest with us and real with us and not put on an act and try to be the proper version of themselves, the person that they really are. That's who we hope to see in the therapy room. That's who we hope to meet. And we as therapists equally need to turn up in the same way. So we also need to be honest and real and transparent and create a place where the client feels safe. They feel like they know where they stand because we are being honest and transparent and real from the beginning. We're authentic. I think it's really important to be authentic with clients, because if you're not being authentic, most humans are very intuitive creatures and could generally see right through that. Being authentic is really, really important. And this is a big part of what being congruent is about. It's about making sure we're showing up in a way where the client sees us, they really see us. And you might be wondering why that is so fundamental. And I think it's because we do need to be able to create a space where we're both in it together. In the way that I spoke about before, we're both in it together. Me and the client are in the room. We're in the client's stuff together. And I'm showing up as me. I'm not showing up as an act. I'm not showing up as like a role. I'm not playing a role. I'm trying to turn up as me. I'm not acting at being me. I'm being very congruent, and I'm being transparent, and I'm being honest, authentic. Those are the key words, really, when you think about congruence. Now, of course, there's something here that is really important. These core conditions come as a 3 for a reason. If you need to be congruent, to be in a therapeutic relationship with your client, then you need the other core conditions there in order to help that to be received by the client in the way that you intended it. So, for example, one of the things that I always say when I teach this to students is that congruence is not speaking as you find. So we're not there to be brutally honest with a client. That doesn't serve them in any way. But equally, we're not there to be untruthful. We're there to be in a place where we can be really real. And that's quite challenging for a client. That can be really challenging, especially when they're a person that's used to people telling them what they think they want to hear. But we're not going to do that. We're going to be different. But what is important in order to ensure that this is a safe process for the client is that we also put congruence alongside unconditional positive regard and empathy. Because it's really important that we have all 3 of those functions going on at the same time. Because otherwise, if we take away unconditional positive regard and we begin to judge our client, then we might say something in a very congruent way that comes across as being really, really unkind and comes across as being, can be really quite damaging, can't it? So we have to use unconditional positive regard alongside congruence. So although there may be times where you might feel that you desperately disagree with a client's view, or you desperately disagree with something that they've done, where unconditional positive regard keeps that in a way where it's nice and balanced and measured, is that it's sort of, because we're not judging the client and we're, sitting alongside them using empathy, that would stop us from being really congruent and going, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you at all. I don't agree with anything that you've done. I don't agree with what you've just said. Although that would be a very congruent thing to do and a very congruent thing to say, it would be very difficult for the client to receive, and it would probably rupture the therapeutic relationship. So we use congruence in connection with the other core conditions, because it's not about us just speaking as we find. It's not just about us sitting there and just saying whatever we want. That is not safe and appropriate in the therapeutic room. So it is very much around tailoring it, using the other core conditions, especially thinking about empathy along there. You want to be in a place where you're really with your client, you're down in the dirt, as we spoke about before. And we can't do that if we're telling them, well, I don't agree with that. So yes, it is I would say congruence is probably a slightly more palatable and watered down version of how you might be perhaps with other people in your life. For example, if you were having an argument or a little bit of a heated debate, let's just say, with somebody you were close to, a partner, let's say, you may not operate and talk with unconditional positive regard and empathy in mind when you're not in the counselling room. So you might be saying to them, I don't agree with you at all. What you're talking about, that sounds ridiculous. That would be speaking as you find. It would be true, and it would be how you're feeling. So therefore it would be authentic, but it would be speaking as you find, because you've not got the elements of unconditional positive regard and empathy there alongside congruence. I always say to supervisees something about this, that they work with a client. And sometimes we don't always vibe with every client. Very occasionally that happens where we don't vibe, the relationship doesn't work very well, we don't necessarily enjoy working with every client. And I've had supervisees in the past that have talked a lot about this with me in supervision and not enjoying the work and not wanting to really work with the client. And then it reaches a place where the client is naturally coming to an end of therapy perhaps, or has decided themselves that it's time for them to move on or try something else. And the therapist says, if you need to come back in the future, let me know, my door's open for you. And I look at that in supervision and think, well, how congruent is that statement really? Because actually the chances are the therapist won't want to work with that particular client again. Not necessarily because the client is not a nice person or because of, them as an individual, but maybe there's something in the relationship, maybe there's some transference or some counter-transference going on, and it means that the counsellor is unlikely to want to work with that person again. So therefore, I don't see that as being a very congruent thing to say when the client is leaving for that final time. And to say, you can come back in the future if you want to, if that isn't congruent and true and honest and authentic, is probably not ideal, because then if the client then does want to return in the future, it's quite difficult, isn't it, to say, oh gosh, I can't now. So where I think it's really important is if you have, worked with a client and the time has come to the end, you might not say something like, I've really enjoyed working with you, if you haven't, but you might say something like, I really appreciate everything you've brought to our sessions. So you're being honest, because most people, even though you may not enjoy being with a client or maybe not enjoy working with them, usually can appreciate how hard it is to sit in that chair, right? It's really hard to sit in that client seat. And they share and they're working with you. And you might say, I really appreciate everything you've brought to our sessions. Now, to me, that's a much more congruent thing to say than I've really enjoyed our time together or I've enjoyed working with you. So do you see where I'm coming from? It's a very subtle change, but it's something that leaves it feeling congruent and honest and genuine. So that's something to really bear in mind, that everything that we say and everything that we do forms part of the therapy, forms part of a therapeutic process. So congruence is about being genuine. It's about showing up as you, as an authentic version of yourself. But it's also not about just saying whatever you think you want to say. Does that make sense? I hope that really sinks in for you, because it's such a difficult thing to get your head around sometimes, because you could easily, if you look at it on paper, on face value, if you take congruence on its own, people may think when they look at it that means that counsellors can say whatever they want. I'm being honest, I'm being congruent, I'm being true, I can say it. But that's not the way in reality, because that's going to lead to a really damaging relationship. And most certainly, if you're really blunt and really brutal, like a proper rupture within your relationship therapeutically. So we have to look at congruence, and it is not about speaking as we find. But equally, it's not about saying that you enjoy spending time with a client if you don't. And that is really, how you word it is then really important. So I hope the example that I gave around not telling a client you enjoy working with them versus saying, I appreciate everything you bring to a session. If that second option of I appreciate everything you've brought to our session is true, then that is a lovely congruent statement to use, for example, isn't it? So I hope that example helps you to see what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that you have to be dishonest in some way, but you can choose what you say. You can choose those words quite carefully to protect the therapeutic relationship, but to also ensure that your client is safe. Because to just say whatever you think you want to say is probably not going to be helpful for either of you, for client or counsellor. So I hope that is something that helps, because I think it's quite a hard one to get people's head around sometimes. I think it is about trying not to speak as you find, and you might make a mistake sometimes, we all do, but just sort of sitting back and thinking, what is appropriate here? What is appropriate with this client? What can I say that feels true but isn't necessarily going to be the full brunt of it? It's not going to be the full brunt of what you think, because you're using empathy and unconditional positive regard alongside that congruence. It's a real recipe, isn't it? It's a bit of a cake mixture. If you make a cake and you miss out the eggs, you're not going to have a very nice cake at the end of it. And it's the same here. If you have your 3 core conditions and you miss out unconditional positive regard, the cake isn't going to be the same at the end. I hope that's not made you all hungry now. But that's where I'm kind of coming from. It's a recipe. All of these 3 things are working together in tandem. And that's why they're called the core conditions, because they are core, they're fundamental. And they're very much there to build that therapeutic relationship. Gosh, it's quite noisy here. I hope you can't hear all those. I can hear children running around to the park. I'm sure that you'll be able to hear that, but hopefully it'll be okay. I can't even edit it out because I was talking as well. Anyway, I really hope that has been helpful for you. And I hope that it's something that helps you to sort of see the best way to try to understand how to piece these things together. This is the last in that little series about core conditions, but if there's ever anything that you want me to cover in terms of more kind of theoretical stuff, I try to avoid doing too many theoretical things here on this podcast, because there are other podcasts out there that do that amazingly well. So I tend to be here very much to build, help to build confidence and help to build that feeling of being good enough. But if this has helped you and it's something you'd like me to do more of, please let me know. I'm really happy to do that. Anything that I can do to help is, something that I really want to be able to do more of. So I guess it's time for me to say goodbye. If you want to reach out to me on my Facebook page, I will leave the link in the show notes below. And also, If you have enjoyed this podcast and you find it helpful and you'd like to leave me a 5-star review, please do. I would be, again, so grateful. And feel free to share this with all of your counselling peers, the people that you're on your courses with. Spread the word and help me to get more people out there. We recently hit 50,000 downloads and I was absolutely delighted. And I always say that if this had reached 6 people from the beginning, I would have been happy. And to reach that number has just been absolutely a dream come true for me. So thank you so much to all of you that support the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. And I will really look forward to hearing from you in due course. In the meantime, take good care of yourselves and remember you are good enough as you are. Take care. Bye-bye.